is brought to you by the North Dakota Petroleum Foundation. From heating our homes and powering our vehicles to cell phones, clothing, and medical equipment, oil and natural gas makes everyday life better. North Dakota Oil and Natural Gas, advancing the possibilities. Learn more at ndpetroleumfoundation.org. Welcome to Play Talk and happy Friday. We're going to talk in a minute about a cryptocurrency mine that's going to open in North Dakota, which is, I'll tell you, I was actually over at Jim Hill Middle School today speaking to my daughters. It's called Avid. It's Avid. It's kids who are sort of college bound. Like, it's really focused on sort of college bound kids and on organization, and it's a great class. But anyway, her teacher invited me over to talk about my job. And we were talking about it, and I was trying, like, because they were asking me, like, well, what's the story you're covering right now? And I'm like, well, I'm covering cryptocurrency mining. And they're like, what is that? And so now I'm on the spot having to explain to them what this is. And and it's terrible. Like, when I'm writing, I always have to, I start at the beginning. So it's like, well, in the beginning, we used gold. And then we had money that represented gold. And then the money stopped representing gold. Now we have cryptocurrency, and we're pretending to mine gold to establish cryptocurrency's policy. Does any of this make any sense to you kids? And no, of course it didn't. So anyway, what a way to start the podcast. Hey, I should thank the reader. Usually I thank you all for listening to the podcast. Here I'm going to thank you for reading my columns. I got second place for the Minnesota Newspaper Association's Better Newspaper Column contest in the columnist category. I got second place, which is a remarkable feat. I'm going to tell my guest, Jamie Selzler. Jamie's a former executive director of the North Dakota Democratic Party. He's joining me this Friday to talk about stuff. Jamie, I don't know how I won best columnist for the Minnesota Newspaper Association, writing almost exclusively about North Dakota. I'm pretty proud of that.
I have to assume it's some sort of affirmative action program that they have
for North Dakotans
to give North Dakota a little bit of love every now and then.
In the Minnesota newspaper. No, actually, the reason why is because obviously our Forum Communications, we have a lot of publications over in Minnesota, and sometimes I publish in them. So I guess we're a member of their association as well, and they liked my column. This is what the judge wrote about my columns. They wrote, public affairs columns of Rob Port are well-researched and well-argued. What makes them special is they're not only interesting, but important, which listen, the reason I'm telling you, most of the time, the email I get is people calling me an a-hole. So it's to have, I don't know, to get a little bit of praise like that. I got to admit, Jamie, it felt good. Second place, not bad.
Well, it is good. And, you have quite a history and a record in North Dakota. And back when I was working in politics, you and I had our rounds a little bit. I said I wasn't ever going to talk to a blogger at that point. And, this was a long time ago. But
that was back when bloggers were these...
You were some guy trying to get
trolls.
me to you were some guy who I knew. I mean, because we knew each other when we were really young. But you were this blogger who was trying to get me to return a donation to someone, and I'm
right.
I don't want to talk about this. So, and I think you should be proud of yourself. I mean, over the years, you're probably doing something right when you're taking arrows from all sides of the political spectrum.
Yeah.
When you have Republican legislators who are mad at you. When you have Democrats who don't want to go on the show, means that you're probably asking the right questions. So you absolutely deserve to feel some pride in yourself there.
Probably. Well, anyway, it was great to win, to be recognized, I guess, in that way. And I'm always so thankful for everybody who reads and downloads the podcast. And of course, speaking of which, you should subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already through a podcasting app, Spotify or Pocket Cast or something like that. You get notified when there's new episodes. It's a great way to listen. And also, you should subscribe to our newspapers, whether it's the Fargo Forum, the Grand Forks Herald. It honestly doesn't matter which one you subscribe to. You can subscribe to the Jamestown Sun. You could use that to read the Fargo Forum. You can read once you're in the network for $10 a month. You can read any of them. Which I think is a great value, really. I mean, you're talking about publications across the state. Think of all the sports reporting and everything. And we're adding extras all the time, where if you're a subscriber, you can tune in to like live streams of certain things or whatever. I think they're still working on that sort of content, but it's really awesome. And these digital subscriptions I know have been great for our business. That's really going well for us. And I think we produce just great content. And if you want to enjoy more of it, you can subscribe. All right. So Jamie, we're going to talk about this cryptocurrency thing. There's an announcement in that governor, and these sorts of announcements are not unusual, right? It's not unusual when there's going to be some big new investment in the state of North Dakota. The governor, oftentimes the congressional delegation, state lawmakers, they all like to be up on the podium, right? They like to be a part of it, and I think the business community likes it because that's good PR to have the governor out, sort of flogging your brand for you. But in this case, it's a company called Atlas Power, and they're going to build a data center in western North Dakota. And I don't know. I think it's surprising because they certainly highlighted that way. It doesn't sound like it's going to be exclusively a crypto mining thing, but it's going to be a data center. And one of the things they're going to do is crypto mining, which is basically just computers sitting in a room doing computational functions that then replicate the process of mining, and they create Bitcoin. So think of it like digging gold out of the ground, except like a video game, I guess. I mean, that's kind of what it is, right? Like they're farming for cryptocurrency. They're mining for cryptocurrency. I mean, it's literally what they call it as a mine. So anyway, Atlas Power is going to build this thing. They're based out of Montana. There's another company that's going to be involved in the construction. And this company was at Governor Burgum's press conference as well. And this company is called FX Consulting. And the guy who is the head of FX Consulting, who's the president of FX Consulting, has let's say a checkered past. At one point, he was convicted of murder, although later that conviction was overturned. And he did, though, spend 10 years in jail because in a subsequent trial, I think what it was, the verdict from the murder conviction, that was overturned. A second trial was ordered. And at that trial, he was only convicted of charges like robbery. And anyway, there's a whole thing. And this was big news, Jamie. Like, this was like true crime industry news. Like, they've done like documentary episodes about it. And I mean, this was kind of a big thing. His name's Richard Tavish, by the way. So anyway, Governor Burgum holds this press conference, and then people, I'm sure who are curious start Googling the names of the people involved and come across Mr. Tavish's criminal history, which brings us to today, where Governor Burgum is getting criticism for basically being at a press conference with somebody who had a very ugly track record. Now, Governor Burgum spokesman Mike Nowatzki, his comment is that Governor Burgum knew about this Mr. Tavish's criminal history, but that he's been doing business in North Dakota for 10 years. His criminal record happened a long time ago, and he was aware of it and decided to endorse the project anyway. Which brings us to the question for you, Jamie, is does Governor Burgum deserve criticism for this?
Specifically because of Mr. Tavish, I don't think so. In general, I think that those who have served their time and paid their price to whatever consequences they have to do, they certainly deserve a second chance. I think there are some things where, for example, if someone has been convicted of significant financial crimes, and maybe you don't want to put them in a job that's in charge of money or something. But in general, I don't think something like that should be enough. I don't think that issue should be enough to hold up a project like this going forward.
Yeah. No, we could talk about I want to talk about the project itself and the cryptocurrency, because there's a question there about whether projects like this are good. We could talk about that in a minute.
We'll get there, but for him, but specifically, here's what I suspect is going to happen if I were to look into a crystal ball. He's been doing business for 10 years in North Dakota Mike Nowatzki was really good in his statement about essentially couching with as far as we know kind of language, by all reports. Well, you and I and everyone listening to this podcast know that it's not like everyone who works in the oil and gas industry in North Dakota, especially those who are coming from out of state, are all pure and come with the best of intentions. It seems like there's constantly things happening where criminal acts are happening and prosecutions are happening.
There's a lot of industries like that. I
mean, well, there is, but it will not shock me if people start coming out of the woodwork to say, well, 2 years ago he did this, which was pretty sketchy or whatever.
Although
that's what's going to end up tanking this.
Although as somebody who has I get those emails, right, with people who have an axe to grind against somebody else.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, you got to be careful, because just because somebody comes out and says, well, this guy cheated me or whatever, and I have no knowledge of any of that. Nobody's come to me. I haven't seen anything like that. I guess I'm in the Nowatzki camp, whereas as far as I know, this guy, you got to be careful when people make accusations, because why are they making the accusation? Did something really happen? Or does somebody they not like just is in the limelight?
Business deal falls through,
so now
they're upset about it.
Listen, when you're in business, stuff happens, and sometimes bridges get burned or whatever. The thing that bothered me about this is we've been spending a lot of time talking about criminal justice reform, and we've been talking a lot about how we treat people who have these sorts of histories, who maybe have been in jail for a while. In fact, it was kind of funny, because juxtaposed with this headline was the Minnesota Democratic Party, the DFL, announcing that they were going to allow felons, right, people who had been convicted of felonies in the past, to participate in their caucuses and hold leadership positions in their party. I actually agreed with that part of the announcement. Their other part of it was, we're also going to allow people who are in the country illegally to participate too. And to me, that's a whole other ball of wax. We could do a whole other show on that question. But I really like the idea. To me, I always think if we let somebody, like we put somebody in jail, they committed a crime, they get convicted, we put them in jail, then we let them out of jail. I think once they're out of jail, we should treat them like normal citizens again, for the most part.
Yeah.
Now, maybe some things like should we allow them to buy a gun? Maybe, but maybe not. But I feel like you have to treat them like otherwise, what does that mean? Like, we've let you, like, you paid your debt. We let you out, but we're still going to treat you like a criminal?
I agree. I mean, I think this is why people who are felons, who have served their time, deserve to have the right to vote again. I think, and in this case, a lot of this is going to end up coming down to a messaging problem, where the governor and his staff said that they are aware of this. Well, when this was announced, it was obviously a huge deal. They had to have known that it was going to come out in the news.
Sure.
In politics, you do this thing you call inoculate yourself. If you're a candidate running for office and you have some thing in your past, you put it out yourself.
Right.
Takes away the sting.
Well, because it allows you, like, the first time the public's being introduced about it, you're kind of setting the boundaries of the narrative.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm the governor's comms director or the governor himself, maybe I'm using this as an opportunity to show how in North Dakota we give good citizens second chances, and maybe that would have come across as even better.
And that's actually true.
By not saying anything, it looks like they were hoping no one was going to look it up or find it.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, if that's what they were hoping, then they were wrong, because this stuff gets out. It doesn't stay quiet. But North Dakota is actually, I mean, we have a long history actually in North Dakota of giving people with criminal records second chances. For instance, voting. North Dakota actually has and this is not a new thing, has for a long time had a very, dare I say, liberal approach to restoring voting rights, which is to say, you don't have to do anything. Once you're out of prison, you can vote again. Full stop, right? You can't vote while you're incarcerated. But in North Dakota, once you're out, you can. We also have another section. This is section 12.1-33-02 of the North Dakota Century Code. The title of this section is Rights Retained by Convicted Person. So this is the law. I'm going to read this. This is a quote. Except as otherwise provided by law, a person convicted of a crime does not suffer civil death or corruption of blood or sustain loss of civil rights or forfeiture of estate or property, but retains all of his rights, political, personal, civil, and otherwise, including the right to hold public office or employment, to vote, to hold, receive, and transfer property, to enter into contracts, to sue and be sued, and to hold offices of private trust in accordance with the law. Now, I read that, and I'm like, yeah, once you've paid your debt to society, you should be allowed to do all these things. And so, as a matter of law, those are the rights that Mr. Tabish has in the state of North Dakota. Now, he's from Montana, so he's not a North Dakota citizen. Yeah. But he's doing business in North Dakota. And under our law, he has a right to do these things. And so I don't know, like if I was the governor, I would have leaned into it and said, yeah, Mr. Tebish has a checkered past. Now, I don't know, is that the governor's place to do this? I mean, this is a private company. To my knowledge, they haven't so far asked for anything from the state of North Dakota. They're not getting any loans or economic development. I think the governor's office has said at some point in the future they may qualify for like a sales tax exemption. But this isn't really an economic development project. Like they didn't come here asking for loans or anything. They're just a business that's going to do a nearly $2 billion, planning anyway, to do a nearly $2 billion project in the state of North Dakota. The law says Mr. Tavish can do all these things. He can enter into contracts. He can make money. He can prosper. And that's how it should be. Once you're out of jail, like if we're going to tell criminals, you can't prosper once you're out of jail because we're still going to hold it all against you. To me, that's just you're hamstringing them, and you're going to increase the likelihood that they're just going to be criminals again because they can't make their way in the world honestly.
Yeah, I think most people generally agree with that. You know, there's out of Fargo, there's the F5 project. Adam Martin, I'm not sure if you've had him on your show. You
Sure.
should, if not. And which is about, you know, helping people reacclimate and rehabilitate. Where I think, you know, this issue, the governor took this on. He was part of the announcement. Part of the job, they get to cut ribbons. They get to announce big projects.
Sure.
If this gets squirrely at some point, and there are vendors who aren't paid, if there, you know, anything that could go wrong with this, people may point back to this and say this was known at the beginning.
But does that mean they're right?
I'm not saying they should do it. No, I'm not saying they're necessarily right. I'm not saying that that should stop this from happening. I am saying the governor can and should do a better job of messaging, of preparing for that, of potentially oversight if there's any possibility for oversight as part of this process. It's a big deal. It's a lot of money.
It is, but it's private money. It's not, you know, it's their money. They're investing it. You know, what they're talking about, at least so far, they haven't asked for anything. It's not taxpayer money.
We'll see what happens. I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, it's pretty easy to announce some big $2 billion project, get everyone salivating over what this means,
and then start saying,
then start coming like, oh,
that's usually how it goes.
Seed money, or you know.
But even then, like does and again, we should be very clear because the entity that's going to own and operate the data center is Atlas Power. Mr. Tavish doesn't work for Atlas Power. Mr. Tavish is the president of the construction company that's going to build the data center. So it's not even the entity itself that we're talking about. It's basically the contractor, the entity, the company hired to build the project. Now, he's part of it, too, because obviously part of the pitch on this is we're going to create construction jobs while we're building it, and that's part of the narrative, and so I'm sure he was there to talk about that.
Well, you're describing him as some sort of, like, ancillary character in all this when he was at the announcement. It was him in the picture with the governor.
Well, that's what I was saying.
He's obviously a more significant.
Yeah, I'm sure he was there. I'm sure. Yeah, he's very much a big part of this deal. But that distinction still matters. The company that's going to operate it, Mr. Tavish doesn't work for them. He has his own company. He's in this to construct it. In the same way when they were building the Dakota Access Pipeline, obviously you had Energy Transfer Partners was going to operate it, but part of that debate in favor of building the pipeline were all sorts of construction. You had LIUNA, the union people who were arguing in favor of the pipeline. They were part of they were in a lot of the press conferences. So that's not unusual that they're there like that.
I don't think you're going to see a lot of, certainly on the political side from Democrats, I don't think that you're going to see a lot of people criticizing the governor for this. I think that on my side of the aisle, there really is a strong desire for people who serve their time to get reacclimated into society. I think I don't think you're going to see a lot of that. Yeah. There'll be a couple of folks who are kind of sniping and view it as an opportunity.
The Facebook people are going to do what they're going to do. And any opportunity, like any perceived opportunity to dunk on the Republican governor, they're going to take it. And vice versa. There's plenty of people on the right who would do it if it's, a Democratic elected official. So,
well, there are people on the right who would do it if it's Doug Burgum is governor. So
that's true. There's plenty of people who are doing it to him on this. Yeah. Right. I mean,
I suspect that you would find criticism of the governor on this issue more from some of the far right folks in the state than on the left.
That's probably true. I just don't think. I mean, to me, that was my reaction. I mean, when I was first reading, because I first learned about it early yesterday morning somebody had emailed me and said, kind of look at this guy's track record. It was, in fact, I don't even know who the person was. It's just, I get emails from people all the time, and he linked me to some stuff, and sure enough, that was it. And I passed it on to our newsroom when I got the tip, because I was also I wanted to get the folks from Atlas Power on this podcast, just to talk about the project. And I didn't want that muddying the waters. I very much wanted it to be covered, which is why I sent it to our newsroom, because it's news. It should be covered.
I think this would end up being a totally different story if his original crimes happened in North Dakota. I think if there were victims in North Dakota who were still around and would talk about what he did to them, 20 years ago, whatever this was.
But should it? I mean, are you more of a victim if you're in North Dakota?
Well, I think that if you're a victim of someone, you have every right to speak out at any point.
Well,
later
sure.
on.
Yeah.
And so, but I think that the governor or anyone else would have a harder time getting on board and being in pictures with someone like that if there were North Dakotans who had been victims originally.
Well,
the fact that, it's such a wild story that this happened that it almost seems.
Well, and that's the hell of it too, because one of the things too is there was I was reading Mike McFeely's column about it. I was reading it, and there was kind of some insinuation, like, there were some things that happened in the 80s that, was kind of sort of maybe this guy did it. But the thing is, he wasn't convicted of any of that. And when it comes to the murder charge, he was, like, his conviction
was overturned, and then he was acquitted.
It was overturned, and then he was acquitted. So that thing is what that means is he's not guilty of those crimes, right? Like, nobody is guilty of anything as a practical matter of law until they're convicted in a court of law. But in the court of public opinion, that doesn't matter. And the thing is that's the reality that you and I deal with when we talk about politics. But there's what people do, and then there's what people should do. And those are often two very different things.
We are in a culture right now that is just obsessed with murder podcasts and Dateline NBC and true crime. And I've listened to those things in the past too, and I
listen to those things all the time. My father arrested a serial killer at one point. I love that stuff.
Yeah. And so I think this kind of feeds into that a little bit, and it's the reason why it's getting some play, and we'll probably continue to get some play as this goes on. But if anything gets squirrely with it, the governor's going to end up getting blamed because he's the one who ended up answering for it.
Depending on what the definition of squirrely is. Right, I mean, because there's a lot of different ways. It might
people
not be
getting paid.
It might not be related to that guy at all, right? Or might not be related. Yeah. Governor Burgum's not in charge of who gets to construct this project, right? The company that's going to own and operate it, they're the ones who are in charge of that. It's their money. It's their project. Governor Burgum's perspective, he's just saying, listen, these people are going to invest or at least say they're going to invest almost $2 billion in North Dakota. That's worth celebrating. And this guy is he's lawfully able to do this business. I kind of think it's the job of the elected official to be agnostic. And again, that gets back to the portion of the Century Code I just read. Under North Dakota law, he has these rights. Yeah.
But that said, I don't think they're going to invest $2 billion in North Dakota.
So let's talk about that, because the crypto mining thing. I like cryptocurrency as an idea. Like, that makes sense. It does bother me because
that's your libertarian.
That's my libertarian thing coming out, where I don't necessarily like that the government controls the monetary supply and they abuse it, right? They use it as a vehicle to spend more than they can, because what the American public wants is low taxes and big government, right? That's what the voters want. And so the politicians figure out ways to deliver that to them. And one of the ways to deliver that is when the government runs out of money, they just print more money, and then it devalues the money that the rest of us have and causes inflation. And I don't like that. And if there were a way to take that power away from the government, I would be for it. And at least on paper, cryptocurrency feels like where it's the value of the currency is based on something other than what the politicians are controlling. I guess I would be okay with that. But I don't know. Like, what I'm having trouble wrapping my mind around is, like, we're just gonna have computers mine cryptocurrency. To me that sounds like a video game. right? I mean, before currency was based on gold, it was based on like some human activity, right? There were people somewhere who were mining gold and digging it out of the ground, and that was our monetary supply. Like, that to me makes sense, right? Or even if you took the currency and like pinned it to some index of commodities, like ag commodities, or like, I don't know, something like that, where the value is tied to something real and something tangible. But you're just going to have computers crunching numbers. It's like cryptocurrency is based on some supply of fairy dust. That's the struggle I have with cryptocurrency.
It's not protected. And I know crypto fans. I have like really good friends who work for crypto companies who've tried to talk me into working for crypto companies. And I just have concerns about security. And no matter what someone says about how secure things are, they're not. I mean, hacking happens and all that stuff happens. At least if I have a bank account, I can be confident I'm going to be able to get my money out of there. And I'm confident that what $100 in my savings account is going to be worth $100 in a week. Crypto is not, it is nowhere close to being a true replacement for actual currency.
No, it's not.
And I know some places allow you to use crypto. You know, you can buy a Tesla with crypto, and a few companies allow you to use crypto.
The city of Williston, I think you could pay your water bill with crypto.
Really?
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
That's a real thing.
Yeah. But I think a lot of folks are just not comfortable with the fact that your value can increase or decrease so dramatically. So I think it'll be a fun thing for some people to play with, and some people have gotten and will continue to get exceptionally rich through crypto. But for most people, it's probably a number of years away before it's practical.
So this project in Western North Dakota is they're building it basically to be crypto mine. Although they said it's going to be a data center and a cryptocurrency mine. Now, the data center idea, and maybe you could, because Jamie has a background working sort of in online commerce and everything else. So I don't know, maybe you could speak to this.
Yeah.
I mean, people have been saying that North Dakota is a pretty good spot for data centers because of the weather and because of cheap energy. And
yeah.
I guess that makes people say that. I don't know. I mean, I know we have cheap energy. I know we have cold weather. I'm not an expert in data centers, but that makes sense. And if we're a place people will build data centers, I think we should welcome that investment.
Yeah. So I'll start by saying for 17 of the last 20 years, I worked for Amazon. I left Amazon. I'm now joke that I'm semi-retired or retired, but I left Amazon this last summer. So I'm not speaking on behalf of Amazon in any way when I talk about this stuff, but I'm just talking about my experience that I have through that experience. Data centers kick off a huge amount of heat, massive amounts of heat. And so what happens if you get 100,000 servers in a building? It's just huge amounts of heat. So a lot of their power consumption is not just the servers running. It's often running AC units to keep it cold. And so over the years, there's been exploring lots of ways that data centers can be built in ways that will kick off the heat in different ways. So, for example, some are exploring putting them on the bottom of lake beds or on the bottom of the ocean, where the water will allow some of the heat to dilute. In a place like North Dakota, I can see why you'd want to put something here, because at
least for a lot of months out of the year.
It's cold for a lot of months. But even in the middle of January, they're still going to be running their air conditioners in this data center because just the nature of how hot it gets. So it kicks off a lot of heat. But my concern is they're saying it's a $2 billion project. Here's what I suspect. And they haven't said exactly how that money is going to come out of this, but I know data centers. I've spent time at data centers. This is going to be mostly prefabricated. I bet that they build most of this data center in Montana. So that's where those jobs are going to be, and that's where those employees are going to be. And they'll build the walls, and they'll build most of it in Montana, and they'll ship it across the border, where there'll certainly be some employees needed to put it together. But they'll be able to put these buildings together incredibly fast because they're just giant rooms, basically. So I don't think there's going to be that many jobs. And then afterwards, you don't really need that many people to run a data center. You can take a data center that's 3 football fields long and a football field wide, and you only need 2 or 3 people to run that thing, because And those 2 or 3 people are technicians. You might have a server down, and so basically these folks are just going around doing tinkering and fixing things. So it's not like you need a huge staff to do this. Most of the staff.
What they said in the press release is that construction, the multi-year construction, because they're going to do it in phases too. The first phase will consist of 16 buildings, each 350 feet long by 30 feet wide, to house tens of thousands of servers that will conduct high-performance computing using 240 megawatts of electricity. Then they have phases 2 and 3, expanding to 500 megawatts and then 700 megawatts, adding additional buildings and servers. So it's phased. So they're talking about this is going to take over several.
I know it's a phase, but
multi-years.
No way they're not going to build these in North Dakota. These buildings are going to be built elsewhere and then just assembled in North Dakota.
So,
well, I'm just saying it's not going to be as many jobs as they think.
They're saying it'll require 100 workers. They're not saying specifically in North Dakota, but 100 workers during the 2-year construction period, and then about 30 permanent jobs once they're up and going. And that probably makes sense. I mean, you're going to have
that 30 permanent, especially if they have however many buildings, a dozen buildings, whatever they're going to have. But the bulk of those 30 are going to be fairly low-paid security folks. One of the biggest issues with any data center is security, and so you need a lot of security guards. You need a lot.
Well,
of
then
cameras.
I hope the security guards aren't low-paid. If that's the biggest.
Well, security guards are often some of the lowest paid employees in any industry.
Yeah, it's not great.
It's not great, but it's accurate. And so you're going to have security guards, and that's going to be the bulk of those jobs there. There's going to be some jobs that require a pretty high-tech knowledge, and maybe those workers are in the area already, and if so, that's great for them. They have this opportunity. And if the company is willing to pay for everything themselves, I'm a capitalist. I'm all about them being able to do what they want to build this. I think if this starts getting into them asking for anything unusual from North Dakota in terms of money, loans, loan forgiveness, stuff like that, we should be a little concerned about it, because there's no way this is going to produce the jobs and the money that they say it will. Also, because they're doing it in phases and it's crypto, they could stop at any time.
Crypto's been such a roller coaster ride. I would be a lot, and this is one of the things that I thought was very compelling, is Governor Burgum was saying, and I'm looking for the exact quote here. Here we go. He goes, "This major investment in North Dakota will further cement our state's growing reputation as a hub for data centers and cryptocurrency mining." The cryptocurrency thing, I'm agnostic about. Whatever. I don't. That seems like a Wild West. I'm not going to invest in it. I don't know enough about it, but I'm also a capitalist, and sometimes emerging industries take risk. And if people want to risk their money this way, I'm not against it. And I'm not against them building in North Dakota. Like, if they want to take a shot at it here, that's great. What I'm really interested in for the future of North Dakota is if we could become a place where people are saying, yeah, that's a good place to build a data center. You build a lot of data centers in North Dakota, and that's a good thing, because it's going to create demand for energy. That energy creates jobs. These data centers, they got to be supplied. They got to be maintained. There's got to be infrastructure. There's ripple effects. I'm for doing stuff in North Dakota. And if it's data centers, great. That's another thing we can do here.
Yeah. I think that them selling this as diversifying the economy in Williston, I think people will end up being disappointed. It's not going to diversify the economy. It might be a good thing for those who work there, and there's certainly some ripple effects from it that are probably going to be good.
That's also the problem. Is the economic development people oversell this stuff a lot. Every project that comes in is a game changer, and it's going to rarely does any one project change anything. It's one business. They're going in. I hope everything goes great for them and their success, because that would be good for North Dakota. I don't care if they only employ 30 people. That's good for North Dakota. I'm really curious and interested to see exactly how how state government tries to incentivize and grow data centers in North Dakota. Data centers, the companies that really build data centers are Amazon Web Services, Google, Microsoft. They have the market. So this company that's going to build the one in Williston, they're saying it's cyber and other stuff. And by the other stuff, I think what they're thinking is they will, rent out server space and power to other companies. But those companies are going to
Amazon Web Services. They're going to Microsoft Azure. They're going to these other companies. And so I don't know how they're going to compete against those companies. On top of that, I don't see those big boys subcontracting to a company like this, because there are security implications that are well beyond the scope of probably what they're building in Williston.
Also, Google, at this point, I'm pretty sure they're throwing up data centers all the time. They don't need some third party to do it for them.
Well, that's the thing, is these guys, they build all their own data centers. But those data centers are usually put into places that are high population centers. Because
a lot of it's geographic. Like they want you using their services to be faster, and at least a part of that is just flat out geography. Like the further the less physical distance the signal has to go to hit a server, the better.
Which is why all these companies, if you were to explore, look at Northern Virginia is covered in data centers, because you can hit the entire eastern seaboard from there. So that's where I think North Dakota may have a hard time attracting some of these companies. Some of these big companies have looked at North Dakota in the past for their data centers in the past. I know that in the
But if you're the governor, like, do you pick it? And again, we're not talking about like they came and asked for the money. At least at this point, they haven't asked that. If they start asking for money, that's a different conversation. But at this point, I don't know. Anybody wants to come and open up a business in North Dakota like this on this scale of investment, at least they say. I don't know. I think you welcome them with open arms and wish them well.
I do too. I mean, I think that certainly we have a responsibility to do that, to try to bring other jobs into the state and try to diversify things. I've had my career because a tech company came into North Dakota, and so I don't want anyone else to not have similar opportunities that I've had over the years. But
and you never know. I mean, you can be wrong about stuff. I never thought Twitter was going to take off. I thought it was dumb. I still kind of think it's dumb, but it sure is popular.
I thought the iPhone was silly, and I was never going to get rid of my BlackBerry.
I did. I saw the iPhone immediately. It was like, oh.
Yeah. So I'm certainly.
Although I'm an Android user today, but the concept of the smartphone was just immediately. But I also was like using a Treo back in the day when you had to pay for data by the megabyte. So I was kind of an early adopter. So the idea like this is all I could listen to my music. I can read my blog and everything from my phone. It was awesome. But yeah, I don't know.
I would just caution the governor, the Department of Commerce, any of the local economic development corporations that all these cities have, just to be, I mean, we should be really careful about giving private business money anyway. I get the reasons why it has to happen sometimes, but we should be really careful when it comes to stuff like building data.
That's one of the, I mean, Fargo City Commissioner Tony Garrick, who announced recently, I mean, he's kind of famous for, like, he would always, and I actually liked it. Tony and I sometimes don't get along so well, but I actually liked when people would come before the Fargo City Commission, and he would ask them the question, do you need it? Like, would you build in Fargo but for this tax exemption we're going to give you?
FedEx. I remember they did that with FedEx a number of years ago.
Right. Yeah, I think
FedEx was moving from Grand Forks to Fargo, and Fargo's going to give them a bunch of money.
Right.
Until FedEx said, well, we're moving no matter what.
Yeah. Well, also the people at Grand Forks were upset. It's like Fargo's going to dole out money to steal our company away. Although they were moving anyway. But I mean, that's the thing, is sometimes they just kind of, it's just kind of a rote thing. Like if you're going to open up a new project in Fargo, you're going to get the tax abatements or whatever the applicable economic development package is. Like we already do that, where there's just not a lot of scrutiny. Like, does FedEx really need to do this, or can they just build their own damn distribution center and maybe the taxpayers don't need to be involved?
All I know is this, and we can move on because this will get us totally off track. There is so much hypocrisy when it comes to economic development. People who get upset about things like quote unquote welfare or the Affordable Care Act or free college, like why would you just give money away to that stuff? We'll happily sit here and write checks over to these companies willing to move into the state or grow in the state.
Yeah, don't look at me. I made my bones riding herd on the economic development people. All right, and I've actually of late I've kind of mellowed out because it's everywhere, right? Like you can't fight it. It's just going to happen. And the argument that if Fargo doesn't do it, Bismarck will, or if Fargo doesn't do it, Rochester, Minnesota will, or something like that. And it becomes a sort of arms race. Nobody's going to unilaterally disarm in the economic development race. So I don't know. That seems like a fruitless debate.
Yeah.
Speaking of fruitless debates, let's talk about a Supreme Court nominee that's coming up. Joe Biden's going to get to pick one, and I hope the process is boring. I really do. I hope we just pick a candidate. We go through the hearings. They say some things. Maybe Republicans hoot and holler that she's too liberal or whatever. And I say she because Governor Joe, this is the most controversial thing, a part of it so far. He made a campaign promise that he was going to appoint a black woman. But I kind of hope we just pick somebody and we go through the process and we appoint somebody to the court and just move on. Because what's been happening with Supreme Court appointees in recent years is a goddamn tragedy, frankly. It's been disgusting to watch. Both sides. There have been no good guys in any of this.
Yeah, there was a time when even if you disagreed with someone, you thought the president has the right to appoint a Supreme Court justice, and even if it's someone whose philosophy I disagree with, if I find them to have the right qualifications and they're credible, I'll vote for them. And Lindsey Graham, that's why Lindsey Graham's voted for almost every Democratic president's nominees for Supreme Court for that reason. He says, I would never put this person to the court, but
that's what I would do, right? Like I'm going to look at their record. Are they a criminal, right? Like, have they taken bribes? Is there some conduct there that's unbecoming and makes them unfit for the office? If not, like, the ideological question doesn't enter into it. Of course, a Democratic president is going to appoint a judge with a philosophy that I don't like very much, but he's a Democrat. He won the election. He gets to appoint. Elections have consequences.
Yeah, I think in this, Republicans will make a bunch of noise because they'll think maybe there's an opportunity to score some points with their donors. They'll use this to raise money. It's what they'll do. And I'm pointing fingers at Republicans here, but
Democrats do plenty of that.
But in this case, they'll do that. It won't change anything. The end result will still be whoever the president nominates is going to end up getting confirmed. Unfortunately, it's going to be with probably a 50-50 vote or a 51-50 vote.
Right.
And so that's unfortunate, but this would be a much bigger deal if it were a conservative justice being replaced as opposed to replacing the liberal. Nothing's going to the balance.
It's a Democratic president replacing a liberal jurist. Yeah. So, I mean, it's not the same as Kavanaugh replacing Ginsburg.
But it's going to be pretty rich with watching over the course of the next couple months, Republicans attacking Democrats for going with post-haste speed on this when they went from nominating Amy Coney Barrett to putting her on the bench in like 26 days or something.
Yeah.
And so that was just fine for them.
I thought it was wrong. I mean, if you want to talk about hypocrisy, I thought it was wrong when Mitch McConnell wouldn't even hold a hearing on Merrick Garland. And I say that didn't really want Merrick Garland on the court. That wouldn't have served my interests. But the thing was, Barack Obama was president at the time. He had the right to appoint, and the Senate had a duty to act on it quickly, not play games. And I hate it because both sides do this, and it becomes this escalating thing. They did it with the filibuster. I mean, that's part of it. What won't be part of this process is the filibuster, because they've gotten rid of the filibuster for judicial appointments already, which started back in 2013. So that, I don't like it. Like, it escalates, and that like Republicans do it, so Democrats do it worse, and then Republicans do it even worse. Just stop.
Well, the problem is there were no consequences. So McConnell held up Garland's appointment for almost a year. The Republicans suffered zero consequences in that following election. They did not lose anything. And so,
because that's what the voters want. I mean, that's the thing. The pie in the sky. That's what the voters want. It's just to go and pursue our agenda at any cost. Democrats, Republicans, doesn't matter.
So, they're politicians. The consequence they care about, do we win or lose in November? And if they're suffering no negative consequences from this level of partisanship or from this level of just derailing anything from happening, it's going to keep happening.
I think it's really interesting you say that, because you can almost talk about it in a different context, where if you look at like the voting rights bill, for instance, that failed. Democrats have only a technical majority in the Senate, right? They only have a majority insofar as Vice President Harris is settling ties. That's why they have the majority, because it's a 50-50 split in the Senate. But yet push this election bill that had no chance of voting Senator Mitt Romney, who, by the way, is no election conspiracy theorist, is no friend of Donald Trump, stood up and said that the Biden administration, like during his speech explaining why he voted no against the bill, explained that nobody from the Democratic side talked to him about any sort of a compromise at all. And when I hear that, the thing is that's the Democrats play, and I'm singling out Democrats and not exonerating Republicans from doing the same thing in different circumstances, but that's the Democrats just playing to their base. Because what's more important is not passing some sort of reform or policy. What matters is they can go back to their voters and say, well, we fought and we didn't compromise, so now reelect us. That's the thing that matters more.
I think in the voting rights package, I think Democrats would have much preferred that passed than to have the
I don't know.
Point that
I don't know that I believe you. I think they're all so cynical, and Republicans too. I think they're all so cynical. I don't think it really matters. I think what matters is that they stay in their jobs.
Yeah, I think the Democrats couldn't even get their own house in order. They couldn't get even 50 senators on board with it. So in their case, I'm not Chuck Schumer. I imagine if I'm them or I'm Joe Biden, I'm probably not doing a lot of trying to get Republicans on board if I can't even get my party on board.
Why not? Maybe you don't need Manchin and Sinema if you have Romney or somebody else crossing the aisle.
Except I don't think it was likely that any Republican was going to vote to change a rule on the filibuster.
Okay, so but you don't even make a phone call? Like nothing. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't do anything. Yeah, of course it's gonna. We couldn't get any Republicans on our side because we didn't call any. Well, okay.
But they'll end up. There will be something passed. Like, there'll be some sort of compromise coming up on the electoral college reform or something that will get a lot of votes, and everyone will pat themselves on the back and say it was a great success. So I suspect that's what's going to come out of this.
They need something because it's an election year, so they need something watered down. Piece of which honestly, I mean, watered down. I say watered down like that's a bad thing. Watered down also means compromised. Watered down also means we gave up some stuff to the other people, or we didn't do all the things that the other side feels is terrible. I mean, really, that's what we should be passing is watered down stuff, because that you're passing a national law for a divided country. Of course, it's not going to be everything I want, none of what you want. Like that doesn't work. Unless your goal is to just get reelected, as I said.
Margaret Thatcher had a quote that she said, "Consensus is the negation of leadership," and which is the most partisan thing someone can say. And essentially, it says if you compromise, you lose the ability to say that you should lead. And I suspect that's what's happening right now on both sides, but certainly on the Republican side.
Okay, but we have a system of government that doesn't give anybody the power. Like there is no unilateral leadership in the United States of America.
That's
There's
wonderful.
checks and balances.
That's what makes our system
right.
the best.
It also means you have to flip and compromise. It means Thatcher's, as much as I admire Margaret Thatcher, maybe that applies when you're a prime minister in a parliament. But it does apply.
The problem is there are too many elected officials in the U.S. who are following that same philosophy.
Right. We have to govern differently here, and we should govern differently. And maybe if Congress doesn't act, then that puts it on the states, where maybe it's easier to build a consensus around something in California. It's just not going to be a national policy. And maybe we should just accept that that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, our system is designed for there to be, for things to be slow and to kind of grind through to get stuff done. But I don't know. I'm worried about the future. I don't know. I mean, I think that the stuff happening right now is just an indicator of a much more significant problem in the country. And I don't know how it gets better. I don't see what can happen that could make it get better. In the past, it was always some sort of major threat. So a war or an attack or like something like that would bring the country together and get us on track for a while. Well, COVID could have been that, but it wasn't, and it made things worse. So
it's because we have terrible leaders. Donald Trump's a terrible leader. Joe Biden's a terrible leader. We don't have good leaders. Joe Biden's he's a bad president. Joe Biden is only a good president insofar as he's not Donald Trump. If we're
Well, I
grading
love
on
that
a
he's
scale,
not Donald Trump. I'll be
I
honest
like
with
that.
that.
Yeah, I like
But
that. I still didn't.
I
vote for him.
I would probably give him like a C or a C minus. I think he's done some things. I think the economy's doing well. I think unemployment's low. I think wages are up.
All right. Well, we would have to start a whole other show to debate that topic, but we're just not going to. I don't. Let me. Here's my theory about how we could do better is, and this is going to sound terrible coming from a professional journalist who just spoke to a middle school class about how important things like transparency and accountability are. But it's almost like we need the public to stop caring as much as they do. I don't think we don't have a problem with apathy in this country. Everybody's talking about politics all the time. It's everywhere. It's everything. And we kind of need to just back off and let the politicians cut some deals every once in a while. We had a political science professor from NDSU on the show a while back. And that was one of the things he was saying is we ought to bring back the smoky back room where people could go in the room and do some horse trading. It's because the politicians are on social media, they have become so reactionary to the constant feedback loop that they're getting that it'd be better if people just didn't pay so much attention.
Yeah.
Again, that sounds terrible, but do you understand the point that I'm trying to make?
I get it. I mean, the smoky back room excluded a lot of people who never had a voice at the table. The smoky back room. I would
argue that was a result of some things that were going on outside of that room. The problem wasn't the smoky back room. The problem was because of racism and some other things outside of that room. Those people didn't have people in the room.
Yeah, except same things existed in that room too. But the smoky back room also did produce some exceptional presidents.
Sure.
And leaders. So I mean, there's obviously you take good and bad. When I'm talking about rolling things back, I don't want to go back to racism. Yeah, I mean, that's not what I'm saying. You want to go back to time. You and I guarantee you and I, and we've not talked about this. I bet you and I had the same experience when we were teenagers, when we were in our 20s and 30s, until maybe mid-Obama years, when you would tell people that you liked politics, you were into politics, most people would say, oh, that's so boring, or I don't like that kind of stuff. And you always kind of felt as a political nerd, like, well, I don't really have a lot of people to talk to about this because most aren't into it. They tune it out.
I had the same experience with the internet. Like, I remember the internet before the world, I remember when it was like a dial-up. When I started the blog, I was using dial-up internet. That's how long ago it was. And I was I was probably just 4 or 5 years removed from using Prodigy to connect to the internet. And I remember when Prodigy announced that they were going to connect to the World Wide Web, and it was like a big thing. Like, you could go to websites now.
Rob, I'm so old. I used to dial into bulletin board systems.
Yeah, Usenet and everything else. Yeah, absolutely. Did you ever play the games on the phone? Did you know that like in the SRT phone book, they had the whole games page and you could call and have a choose your own adventure thing on the phone? Did you ever do that?
I did do that because SRT had the internet over the telephone. I was talking with someone about that. By the way, just totally aside, because it's SRT.
Source River Telephone. That's by the way, for people who are not from Minot, that's our local telephone provider here.
Yes. About a year ago, I dialed 852-1431, which for everyone who grows up in Minot knows that's the number you call for the time and the temperature before you had cell phones and weather apps. And it still works. It'll still tell you the time and the temperature.
Does it really? Wow.
Yeah, it does. It blew my mind.
Even on a cell phone? Or do you have to call from a landline?
Yeah. No, you call and it'll tell you what the time and temperature in Minot is. But anyway, so to your point, I think politics, that's one of the reasons I was excited for Joe Biden was he's kind of boring. And I thought, well, maybe we're going to bring some boring back. But I don't know. I think you have some of these Marjorie Taylor Greens and Lauren Boeberts and Madison Cawthorns. And you have some of these folks that
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I mean, come on. It's not just the right that's got insane people.
I wouldn't call her insane.
She's nuts.
I will say that there are some people on the left that are pretty out there. So, but these people are, I mean, for all faults, they're interesting and they're entertaining. And if Donald Trump did anything horrible to us, he turned politics into just this entertainment, another entertainment outlet.
It was heading that way already. It's just he just leaned into it.
Steroids.
He quit the pretense and I'm just an entertainer. I was about to call him P.T. Barnum, which I think is actually an insult to P.T. Barnum, who's a very interesting historical figure, but it doesn't deserve to be compared to Donald Trump.
Now it's entertainment. So someone like a Marjorie Taylor Greene I don't think she has any interest in, and people like her, I don't think they have any interest in actually causing any change in Congress. They're just there for the show. It's all about the show for them. And as long as politics continues to move in that direction, I don't know how it gets better.
I think a lot of people involved in politics, and not even elected office, but involved in advocacy, I think inevitably they just stop. It just becomes about the show. It just becomes about the fight, and they stop trying to actually solve the problems they were initially trying to solve. I think that happens a lot, honestly.
I worked for a guy once in politics who said that not everyone who gets elected to the U.S. Senate is weird, but once they get there, they all get kind of weird. And I can see why, which is, you were one of 100 and you have everyone. I mean, everyone's just following you around.
I think it would be hard. Everybody wants a piece of you, right? Everybody kind of wants. I think it would be hard maybe not to get a distorted view of yourself. It's so funny because, again, while I was in front of this middle school class, I should have probably recorded this because it was great. I was telling a story about a Senate aide that I was talking to one time, and he had gone to one of these summits or something that the senators hold now and then to get together to talk about a policy issue, and it was a bipartisan thing, so there was Republicans and Democrats there. But anyway, he was just telling me these stories about like how weird the senators are, and I remember he said that he was talking to John Kerry. And he said that he had walked up and he was talking to John Kerry about something, and he halfway through the conversation he realized that John Kerry wasn't listening to him because he was busy fixing his hair and the reflection, because it was outside, fixing his hair and the reflection of the guy's sunglasses, because he could see himself, and so he just started doing his hair while he was talking to this guy. And he said that Kerry had like a scarf or something, and he was this is really expensive scarf, which blows my mind that I guess that's a thing. Like there's expensive. It shouldn't blow my mind. People pay a ridiculous amount of money for tennis shoes, so maybe scarves are in that category too. I don't know, but he had this really expensive scarf, and he wanted people to comment on it, so he kept flourishing this scarf as he was walking around. And I'm picking on John Kerry, but that's just the story that I know. Yes, politicians are weird, and they get weirder the higher up the ladder you go.
Yeah, I think that politicians get a bad rap. I respect politicians. I think it is, and I've run for office, and I, lost by just a hair, but in hindsight, thankfully. But it takes a lot to put your name on a ballot, and most people suffer. Most people fear rejection. Imagine putting yourself out there to the point where everyone in the world is going to know you were rejected.
Right.
Certainly, everyone in your world is going to know that you were rejected potentially in an election.
I have the part of it where I write and say controversial things in the public space, and so I kind of have to live with that, right? I show up at somebody's house party, and it's there's Rob Port, let's go argue with him about politics, and really I just want to play board games. That's kind of what I have to live with. But the one thing I don't ever have to do is run. I don't have to be elected. I don't have to worry about that. Yeah. And boy, I'm glad that.
Yeah, no, I remember when I was executive director, I was at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bismarck with a guy who later became the city commissioner. And I was sitting there, and someone had recognized me from TV because you're in Bismarck, so they interview you a lot. And at the table next to me, starts trashing Hillary Clinton at the time, loud enough so that I knew he was trying to make sure I could hear him.
You get people baiting you. Yeah.
And I ignored him, whatever, and told the people I was with, this is going to get bad in a minute. And he did. He got up and he literally got into my face and started you Democrat, blah, 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 curse words. And I was we got to get out of here, because if he hits me and I defend myself, the news story is Jamie Selzler, leader of the Democrats,
involved in fist fight. Well, even if it's just involved in fist fight, it makes it sound like
I was protecting myself. But so he got out of there. But stuff like that happens. But I think most people who run for office do it from a really good place. They have beliefs. They want to help their communities, and I think that at some point for many of them, winning re-election becomes more important to them they use winning re-election to justify trying to get other things done. And every now and then you have folks who, I will always think of Earl Pomeroy in 2010, voted for Obamacare, knowing it was going to be used against him in North Dakota, but did it anyway with the idea that this is probably going to cost me my re-election. I really respect when politicians do that, because it doesn't happen all that often.
I do too. And I say that. I know Earl Pomeroy, friends with Earl Pomeroy. I didn't like his vote. I didn't vote for him in that election. And glad he wasn't in Congress anymore, because although I like the guy personally, he hasn't had the governing philosophy that I want in office. But I think there's something noble about taking that stand. And it gets back, it's something I've been writing a lot about, and we don't need to get into this, but Edmund Burke, who was part of the Scottish Enlightenment that informed a lot of the founding ideals of our country, he had a concept of public service. And I'm paraphrasing here, but it was essentially, I don't owe you my obedience, I owe you my reason, right? Which is, I'm not going to stick my finger in the wind or do a public poll. And obviously this was at a time when public polling probably wasn't. But it's not my job to try to discern what the masses want me to do. They chose me. I'm going to exercise my reason and my logic in this given situation, on this piece of policy or decision that I have to make as an elected official. And then they can decide at the ballot box if they want that or not. They want more of that or if they want less of that. I like that. And I think there's just not a lot of people. Like I hear all the time, like, well, I got 5. Like in North Dakota, it is remarkably easy to influence a lawmaker. They get like a half dozen emails on a topic, and you're going to turn their head. They may not change their vote, but they'll take notice. And I just think that that's wrong. I mean, I think you have to listen to the public, but at some point, like, you're the one in the seat. You have to exercise your judgment, and then you go to the ballot box and you defend it. And I guess if the voters don't like it, they'll choose somebody else. But you have to be willing to do that. And there's just not a lot of people who are anymore.
Well, and you have to be able to live with yourself. Senator Heitkamp took what I think is a brave vote to the Supreme Court, voted against Brett Kavanaugh. Ugh. You and many others may disagree with that vote. But
she said she judged the guy based on his body language.
But Rob, you have to accept that she felt that way and voted that way, knowing it was going to hurt her reelection chances.
I think that's I think the Democrats needed her vote. I don't think that was very principled. No. She could
have voted the other way. It wouldn't have made any difference.
I saw polling. She was going to lose, and it didn't matter how she voted on that.
But at the end of the day, she and politicians like her have to be able to look in the mirror. And I think there's a lot of politicians who are willing to not do that.
Yeah.
So I respect any politician who takes.
Well, we'll have to spend another show. Right, we'll have to spend another show talking about the things that Heidi Heitkamp maybe shouldn't like when she looks in the mirror.
Come on.
But that's not today. Jamie, I thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Jamie and I don't agree on a lot of things, but it's always fun to talk.
I have no doubt this will be your most downloaded and listened to podcast in history, so you're welcome in advance.
In advance, the Jamie Selzler bump. That's what it is. Chad Oban's been, because he co-hosts with me on Wednesdays, and he's been talking about the Oban bump in the podcast numbers, because this last year or so, the numbers have just been, especially in the last 6 months, it's really been taken off. And I always point to him that the trend pre-existed, but typical Democrat just want to take advantage of a Republican's hard work over here, right? Jamie's smiling and laughing. That sounded horribly conceited, and I don't actually believe that. But I
like anything that makes fun of Chad Oban, so that's
really
fine.
Yeah. Let's call it bald. What else can we say about him? I shouldn't say that. I'm most of the way bald.
I went to breakfast with him today and had a chance to say some of the stuff in person. So
did you?
Nice.
All right.
I did.
Well, that's good. Well, Jamie, thanks for your time. I appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Rob.